Believe it or not, I have not done a video testing how long you should rest a brisket. I mean, it seems like everybody on YouTube is talking about that's the answer. Everybody says that's the method that yields the best results.
A long rest, I'm talking like 8, 10, even 12 hours, improves the quality of the brisket.
Brisket absolutely needs this resting time to redistribute moisture within the brisket.
My number one tip to any beginner or anyone that's struggling with their brisket is try giving it a really long, heated rest.
Something very special happens to a brisket when you rest it for 10 hours. This is really good. Best brisket ever.
I've kind of taken it for granted, and so I bought a warmer, and I was gonna start to do long rests on my briskets as well. And then somebody that I have a huge amount of respect for as a cook, Johnny White, one of the guys behind Goldie's Barbecue in Fort Worth, Texas, the #1 rated barbecue joint on Texas Monthly, said he doesn't think it matters.
I don't think the resting is really that important. I think it's everything that's leading up to that. Once the brisket comes down to 140, what is going on in the warmer that would make it do anything different? It's 140, it's ready to slice it.
And I respect Johnny. And I gotta tell you, he served me 2 briskets. One the day that I got there, and one at the end of the day that we were cooking together when they taught me how to cook the Goldie's Barbecue way. And both of them were the best briskets I've ever had. And so if he's telling me it doesn't matter, then I probably have to decide for myself. So for the next 24 to 30 hours, Nick and I are going to do an experiment. We're gonna cook these 2 briskets. So here's the program. One of them, I'm gonna trim up and get on the smoker behind me. And then 10 hours later, I'm gonna trim up the other one, whether the first one's done or not. So I wanna get a 10-hour difference between when they finish roughly. So one I can rest for 2 hours, the other I can rest for 12 hours, cooking on exactly the same post oak wood behind on the same smoker, but one of them's gonna rest longer in the warmer. Then we're gonna see whether the Goldie's method means you don't have to rest it longer, because with the tallow and the open cook and the wrap at the end with tallow, that does enough, or whether Johnny's actually getting the benefit of the long rest without realizing it. And that's part of what makes his briskets the best that there are. So I'm gonna dig into this brisket. This one we'll put back in the refrigerator until tonight. All right, so let's start over here on the fat side. As usual, we're gonna start by removing the mohawk. Not that this isn't good meat, it's great meat. We're gonna use it for sausage later, but the way it's hanging off of here, it's just not gonna cook evenly. It's gonna overcook and not be usable. See, we've got a little bit of fat in here that I'm gonna pull out. That's sticking out, so it's not gonna render into the meat. We got a nice thick flat over here, a little bit of fat over here that's gonna need to be trimmed. So we want this to be aerodynamic. We want the smoke to flow over this evenly, so we don't want any weird points that are gonna disturb airflow. So we want smooth on top as well as on the bottom. Here we've got a little bit of decal fat that we're gonna pull out, and we're not gonna get super aggressive here. One of the things that nice people at Goldie's taught me was that having a little bit of this extra decal fat in between the point and the flat, when that renders, that we've got a shot at that helping keep the flat a little bit moister. So we're gonna honor that and try to make that same effect here. So this has got a big piece of meat that's not point meat kind of sitting on the side here, and that's not uncommon for these Costco ones, but you see here, this well marbled meat, that's the point. So I'm actually gonna get pretty aggressive and pull this off. I could probably cook it and it'd probably be okay, but it's not gonna help the test that we're doing. It'll be just fine as sausage or burgers. There we go. Now we're starting to see some well marbled meat. Started at 17 pounds. All right, 10 pounds, 12 ounces. So 10 3/4 pounds after trimming. So we got quite a bit of meat and fat off of there. That meat's gonna become sausage, and the fat we're actually gonna make tallow with. I'll show you how we do that after we get this thing seasoned. All right, a little bit of a warm water spritz, and then a light coating on the bottom here. This, by the way, is the Goldie's rub. So this is actually what they use when they make that #1 rated brisket that blows everybody's mind, including mine. We don't rub, we pat. I don't know why they don't call it a pat, they call it a rub, but this is what we do. Then we'll flip it over and do the same thing for the top. And I'm also going to spritz the sides. As we learned in the most controversial video I've ever made.
Don't forget the sides.
Turns out to be true. Thank you, Bradley Robinson, for teaching us all of that. Not that we didn't all know that seasoning the sides was necessary, but that test gave us confirmation. so I'm gonna put a meter probe into the thickest part of the flat here. Not that we cook to temperature, but this will help me keep track of what's going on, and at least I'll know. Now it's time to cook. Meet you at the grill. This is Boba Fett. He's my Yoder Smokers Durango 24 offset smoker, and we're running at 275 burning post oak wood for the authentic Texas experience. I've got the point end towards the firebox and the flat end towards the stack. And so this thing is gonna cook for a while. We're not gonna even look at it for probably 5 or 6 hours. So bye brisket. Okay, so we're gonna set up beef, a roast, brisket. Now it actually says 203. We're not gonna cook to temperature. We never cook to temperature, we cook to tenderness. So I'm gonna take it up to the maximum it'll track, which is 208, and I'm gonna start the cook. But then I'm gonna add an alarm here to tell me when the internal temperature rises above 195, because that's when I'm gonna start checking for tenderness. And then we just let it run. All right, so this is not something that I show every time I make a brisket, but I get a lot of questions about it, and that is making tallow. So taking these trimmings, I'm gonna separate the meat and the fat. Now, we've got a lot more meat than fat, which is fine. So I always end up with more fat off of a brisket than I need for making sausage. And so what I do is I separate the fat into one pile, meat with a little bit of fat into the other pile. And when we get to the bigger pieces of fat, you'll see this becomes a lot more efficient. And I'm trying to get as much of this fat as I can. I'm gonna use all the fat from today for making tallow for these 2 briskets. And then the fat that I get from the brisket that we cooked tonight will go into my sausage pile. So here's a nice piece of fat that we're just gonna cut up into smaller pieces. We're gonna chop those a lot finer later. All right, so this last piece, notice still has a fat cap on it, but it's so thin that I'm not worried about trying to get that fat out for tallow or sausage. So I'm gonna leave that on the beef and use that in my sausage or ground beef calculation when I try to get my 70-30 sausage or 80-20 ground beef. Put the meat back in the bowl. All right, now on the fat, you'll notice that there's quite a bit of meat left on the fat. That's not a problem because the way that we're gonna make this tallow is actually gonna purify it. Let me show you how we do that. If you don't have a meat grinder, that's okay. I'm kind of cheating. You can just cut the fat up into smaller pieces, but I find that if you put it through a meat grinder, that it actually does help the fat to render a little bit better. And since I'm gonna be using the meat grinder for sausage later, might as well take it out and put this through. All right, we got a lot of ground up fat out of that. This should be a good tallow batch. Now for this much fat, I'm gonna put in about a cup of water. That's gonna cook off, but that's gonna help it when it separates. And then I'm gonna put in a couple of tablespoons of kosher salt. And this is also going to help with separating impurities while this cooks down. Now don't worry, we're gonna separate it later so that we can get all the impurities out, get the meat out, get the fat solids out, and just keep the tallow. But for now, I'm just gonna put this on the smoker all the way back here in the back. I don't wanna interrupt the flow of smoke for the brisket. And I'm gonna put a lid on it. We don't need any smoke in the tallow. We just want the heat from the smoker. Might as well use this instead of putting it in the oven. So we're gonna let that tallow render down. It's gonna take a couple of hours to get all the way there. It's not gonna overcook, but I'll show you the next step when we come back. Tallow's been on for 3 hours, brisket for 4. Okay, that is a nice looking brisket. You can see that the smoke is rolling really nicely over here. Let's take a look here at the tallow. So you can see that it started to render. We're separating the solids pretty well now. We're not all the way there, but we're well down the path. So I think we probably got another couple hours before the tallow's fully rendered. So we'll just let this keep going. So we'll check this again in 2 hours when the brisket's at 6, tallow's at 5. I think the tallow's gonna be done at that point. The brisket's gonna be even more pretty. Rookie move alert. We are now, well, the brisket looks great. We're at 8 hours in. The brisket's at about 175 still going, but boy, that bark looks amazing. but we forgot that we put tallow on here. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is burned. Yep, I let it go too long. But good news, I save tallow every time I make brisket, and I got some left over from last time, so I'm not out of tallow. I'll still be able to do it. Do what I say, not what I do. If you'd have pulled this off after about 3 hours, it would have been perfect. So watch for another brisket video and I'll show you the right way to make tallow then. Okay, we're 9.5 hours in on the first brisket. It's at about 183 degrees. It got through the stall, so it's starting to move. So we're coming up on that 10-hour mark. So let's go ahead and get brisket number 2 ready. So this one doesn't have much of a mohawk to take off, but there's still some. Not happy with this big gash, Costco. That wasn't very nice of you. All right, nice and thick up here. It's thin down here. So we're gonna bring this down just a little bit. I'm gonna be a little bit more aggressive on this than others might be, just because we wanna get it down to the same weight. I feel like this is gonna end up being a problem. So I'm just gonna take a little bit more of this than I normally would. All right, I think we have a brisket. It's not super pretty, but it's well trimmed. Going for 10 pounds, 11 ounces, right? Oh, it's a little bigger than that. I'm gonna just trim some of this extra fat. That'll get us about our 7 ounces and keep our cook times. All right, I'm not gonna weigh it again. We know we're in the right place. So I've got some warm water from inside the house, and we've got our Goldie's brisket rub. Once down and once back, just like the other one. Don't forget the sides, people. All right, last thing in before this goes on the smoker. Let's get our meter probe in. All right, meet you at the grill. Perfect timing, 9 hours and 58 minutes since this went on. I'd say this is looking really good. This is a really nice bark. It is nice and moist around the sides. It looks like coming through the stall really helped it. Same thing, right up here, point towards the fire. This one's ready to start. I'll see you when this one's ready to come off. In the meantime, let's set up that meter for this cook. So again, beef, a roast, a brisket, just like last time. We're gonna take it up to 208. We're gonna start the cook, and then we're gonna add another alarm that tells me when the internal temperature rises above 195, because that's where we're gonna start checking for tenderness. All right, off it goes. All right, we've probed this a couple of times. It hasn't quite been ready, but I think this is gonna be it. Yeah, look at that. We're going right in and out of this. Like Harry Sue would say, Skippy peanut butter. All right, let's take this and let's go get it on the wrap. So I'm gonna put a little bit of tallow down underneath. I'm gonna put a little bit more tallow on top. And just like Goldie's does, we're gonna wrap the brisket with the tallow for the rest. So I'm gonna come across here. I'm actually gonna poke a hole for the meter so I can keep track of the temperature. All right, just like at Goldie's, the warmer is set for 140 degrees. Pay no attention to this broadcast thermometer. That's what we're running at. So brisket number 2 has been on for 2 hours. We got a 12-hour cook out of brisket number 1, and now it's in the warmer for at least a 10-hour rest, at least got a 10-hour head start. So Nick and I are gonna take turns managing the fire tonight and keeping this brisket ready and going. And when this one's ready to come off, we'll see you then. All right, we're at 10 hours and the meter is telling us we're at 195. Now the other one wasn't ready at 195. Don't expect this one to be, oh, I can tell you, I just feel the bottom here. There's no flop to it. This one isn't ready. I feel like the point here, yeah, this is starting to mellow out, but boy, this is tough. So we got a ways to go on here, but that's okay. Like 195 is not where we expected it to be, but look at how pretty this bark is. All right, we'll be back. Probably not gonna check this again for probably 45 minutes or so. All right, right at 11 hours, and I'm hoping that we're ready here. Well, I can see it jiggling now. Oh yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, we're in good shape. Okay, this is ready to wrap too. All right, so just like before, I'm gonna put half my tallow down. I'm gonna put the brisket on top. I'm gonna put the remaining tallow on top. Whatever extra I have, we'll run down the sides and I'm sure get to the bottom anyway. I'm gonna make room for that meter, although honestly my warmer's a Faraday cage with all the metals, so don't get a great signal through, but at least this way we can keep track if we do get a signal. All right, now we're gonna take this directly to the warmer and we're gonna rest this for 2 hours and then we're gonna pull both briskets out. Now, I know there's lots of you who say rest it to 160 before you put it in the warmer, lots of other things, but the way that I saw them do it at Goldie's was right out into 140 degree warmer, not 150, 160 like some people are doing. So that's what we're doing. We got a 140 degree warmer in there. Let's go get this right into there and give it a couple hours to rest. All right, here we go. Flat end in first. It's now 10:09, so we'll see you at lunchtime. Welcome to the main event. The main event!
Another day, another brisket.
Another brisket.
Another briskets.
Couple of Goldie's style briskets. Here's the deal, guys. While Nick was setting up cameras, I set this out, and he doesn't know which one's which. So one of these, so Greg, would you put up on, Greg's the editor, by the way. Greg, will you put up on the screen right now which brisket is which so they can follow along? Nick, you're gonna decide which one to open first, and we're gonna open, we're gonna test, and we're gonna open the other one and test. So we're judging on tenderness, juiciness, taste.
Okay, let's start with the one in front of you.
This one, okay.
Yeah, easiest to slice.
All right.
That looks pretty.
I'm gonna cover some of the juices. So we're gonna go for the middle. Watch it jiggle.
You gonna give us a little bend test? Oh.
Let's start here.
That's,
you over there?
I'd say that's juicy.
We got a little bit of point on top, a little bit of flat on the bottom. Cheers. Cheers. Some point meat here. Cheers.
Wow.
So do you have a guess?
Yes, I'll give you a hint. It was rested for a period of time after being on a smoker.
All right, troublemaker.
That looks, that looks like it may have absorbed the juices a little bit more.
Smells really good too. Not a lot of juice.
Not as many
left over.
juices. Ooh, oh man.
All right.
All right.
It
Super
looks juicier
juicy
to me.
That's packed with way more flavor. What's just the point? There's definitely a difference between those two.
Cheers. Cheers.
I'm not gonna throw either of these away. These are fantastic, but I can taste that that is juicier. That is, I mean, pull apart, delicious. That's probably the long rest.
Yeah, you're right. So we've got an answer. It is not a fad. The long rest makes a difference. Now that we know this is so much better, but it requires a shoot that starts the day before and we have to be around to rest.
Give me the Black's 2-stage.
Oh,
Give
all
it
right.
to me.
All
Give
right.
me the Black's 2-stage.
So is that the next thing? We're going to do a 2-stage cook with a long rest?
I'm in.
Thanks, Nick. We'll see you next time on
Eat More Vegans.